Welcome to the 2020 Rolex Yachtsman of the Year Forum. Regrettably, due to COVID-19, we're unable to do our presentation of a winner of the Rolex Yachtsman of the Year this year, but in its place, we have a good opportunity to speak with four of the greatest sailors America's ever produced, who I'm going to introduce in a short moment. For me, it's quite an honor to be here. This is the 41st time that I've attended one of these Rolex Yachtsman of the Year ceremonies, and the 25th time that I've served as the Master of Ceremonies. So I feel very lucky to be the one to ask some questions. And for these sailors, they've become ambassadors for us, inspiring many young people to pursue their dreams of doing well on the water. Before we introduce our guests, I'd like to welcome Corey Sertle. Corey is an Olympian, a two-time Rolex Yachtsman of the Year, and she's the current president of U.S. Sailing. And also, Corey is on the board of World Sailing, the international governing body of the sport of sailing. So, Corey, it's great to have you aboard. Welcome.
Thank you, Gary, and thanks for hosting tonight's special celebration of these great American Sailing Awards. My name is Corey Sertle, and I am the president of U.S. Sailing. Tonight, we're really excited to welcome back past winners of this prestigious award for a fun night of storytelling and discussions about where the sport of sailing is heading in the United States. I want to give a special thank you to Rolex Watch USA and the commitment that Rolex has made over the past 40 years to the sport of sailing and to U.S. sailing. It's truly been a special partnership that we've had with Rolex over the years. U.S. sailing is sad that we didn't have a chance to present these awards for the year of 2020 during the past situations in our country and across the world. But we look forward next year in 2021 to bringing this award back. But tonight we have a very special presentation, a look back in the last 40 years of the presentations of this award. And we thank you, and we hope you enjoy tonight's program.
Thank you very much, Corey, and thank you also for the good work you're doing on behalf of all of us at U.S. Sailing, and of course the work you're doing internationally at World Sailing. Before we meet our panelists, I'd like to introduce a short film called Common Threads that talks about the role that Rolex has played over the years in our sport, a very important role, and some of the thoughts of these great sailors. Being named the best in your sport is an honor to be treasured. Every year since 1961, U.S. Sailing has recognized outstanding performances in sailing. Rolex has proudly sponsored the Yachtsman and Yachtswoman of the Year Award since 1980. Rolex timepieces are the watch of choice for sailors all over the world. The honorees are presented with a new Rolex. Previous winners have included Olympic medalists, world champions, America's Cup winners, record setters, and around-the-world victors. While the disciplines in sailing are very different, the quest for excellence comes from within.
From the age of 18 to 28, I did a lot of racing with Tom, Southern Ocean racing circuits, Star. Those are the formative years, you know. I mean, I knew how to sail, but I didn't understand how to race.
Went in the sail-making business because I had to do something to make a living. Having been fired, that was the real reason.
Rolex Award winners span a wide range of ages in a sport that demands total dedication.
My dad and I would sail together. We would switch skipper-crew positions on the upwind and the downwind legs because I was too nervous to start, but I could drive upwind, and then he was too clumsy to be on the wire downwind.
A strong mental attitude gives a sailor the edge over the competition.
I understood the rules pretty well. I understood the tight situations. I wasn't always the fastest sailor in the classes that I was in, but I thought about the racing a lot, and I really worked hard at, the right position to be in for the next wind shift or the next tactical situation.
You can find yourself 7th at the first windward mark, and maybe you feel the need to bang a corner or do something dramatic, but actually if you just sail high percentage moves and stay consistent, you'd be surprised how many people get out of your way.
thanks to ever-advancing technology, sailors are able to improve their performance. The best advice for aspiring champions is to embrace both the art and science of sailing.
You're at the pinnacle of something that you've been working at all your life, and you're with a fabulous group of folks, sailing these stunning boats in the most beautiful, spectacular conditions. So I don't think there was a minute I regretted being there.
Well, I always get inspired hearing from our panelists, and we're going to get to talk them right now. First up, Stan Honey, one of the premier navigators in the world. I ask him why he does so well navigating, and he says it's preparation, and I believe that. A graduate of Yale University and later Stanford University in electrical engineering, and winner of Transpac races, many offshore races. He was Rolex Yachtsman of the Year back in 2006 when he won the Volvo Ocean Race on ABN AMRO. He's now on the Council of World Sailing. He's noted for creating groundbreaking graphics for the 2013 America's Cup. And I got to note his wife Sally is a two-time Rolex Yachtsman of the Year. Stan, welcome, and we look forward to our conversation. Next up, Paul Cayard. Paul is a world champion star sailor, a two-time Olympian, a winner of the Whitbread Round the World race. He was America's Cup trimmer, tactician, helmsman, spirited laser sailor earlier in his career. Paul was the Rolex Yachtsman of the Year in 1998, and he's the recent chair of the board of directors of the St. Francis Yacht Club, and he's been working closely with our Olympic athletes of late. Paul, welcome. Look forward to our discussion. Great to see you. Next up, Ed Baird. Ed broke on the scene big time way back in 1980, the last American to be the laser world champion. He's an author, commentator, and he was coach of Team New Zealand in 1995. And I think, Ed, they're still using your lessons. He's a winner of the America's Cup, helmsman for Alinghi back in 2007. He was World Sailing's Rolex Sail of the Year in 2008, and he was U.S. Rolex Yachtsman of the Year back in 1995. And he's about to be inducted into the America's Cup Hall of Fame this week in Auckland. And I should also note his son Nick, just last season, was named the Intercollegiate Sailor of the Year, sailing for Yale University. And we have Johnny Heineken, another West Coast sailor. He's got a big-time sailing family and 2 kiteboard world championships. He was our Rolex Yachtsman of the Year in 2012 and suggests the world would be better off with more wind and less ego. Johnny, I approve of your concept there. And he was the winner of the 2014 Kiteboard Gold Cup. Johnny, welcome. And welcome all of you. So let me just go around the horn here and kick off things. And Stan, I know you were involved a little bit with the America's Cup on the rules part of it, but you've been working on a project for Olympic sailing. Maybe you could just give me a word about that.
This has been a project, well, actually you've been a big part of it, Gary, but since probably 2012, we've been working to put in place a offshore double-handed mixed gender Olympic event. This would be a 3 or 4 day duration event, single race for the gold medal. And it would provide sort of unique media opportunities because there'd be cameras on the boat, both below deck and above deck, continuously running over the course of the entire race. And there would be the ability for sailors to race alongside using e-sailing. But the main difference is that it would provide for sailing the opportunity to tell a story about the human part of the racing. Because you have this long endurance event, it would be the longest endurance event of the entire Olympic Games. And that makes sense for sailing to have the longest event because we are a long endurance event. I mean, all of us on this call have been on races that have, extended over 20 days. I think my longest was 48 days. So it makes sense for sailing to have a long endurance event, but that long endurance gives the ability to tell a story of humans responding to, physical stress, competitive stress, and frankly, endurance stress. And so it really would be a unique way, I believe, for sailing to become more visible as a sport.
Oh, very good. Thank you very much, Stan. I think the longest race I've done is transatlantic, 14 days. 28 days sounds like a long time on a sailboat. Paul, Tokyo 2021 is coming up soon, and we've got our team in place. What advice would you give to our young team that's heading over to Tokyo for the games?
I don't know if I'm really in the advice game. I definitely am passionate about the Olympics, and I'd like to see the United States regain its, I think, rightful position in the Olympic arena. I was on the 1984 U.S. Olympic team when we won nothing but gold and silver. I've witnessed, as we all have, kind of our decline as a nation and the rise of other nations. And as a volunteer, I've been working on analyzing that and thinking about how we could improve our position. And LA 2028 is a great goalpost for that. So I'm trying to help the best I can, let's say, with a long-term vision. I'm sure the athletes who are heading to Tokyo have their game plan sorted out in their mind. And like I said, I wouldn't be one to give them tactical advice on that.
Well, we're all going to watch with great interest what goes on in Tokyo and Enshima coming up, which is just a few months away. Ed, you amaze me how you've been able to stay so competitive for so long in the sport. What's your secret to your longevity being at the top of our game?
There's only one thing it could possibly be, and that's a tremendous family relationship. My wife's been terrific, pushing me out the door, saying, go sailing, get involved, do more. And in fact, just today, I was on a J70 over in Tampa, having a great time in 25 knots of wind, blasting around. So it is fun. I've been lucky to kind of come in along, same with Paul. The timing of our professional careers was right as the sport really grew around the world, and we've been able to do a lot of different sailing on a lot of different types of boats. And I think for me, that keeps me very interested, and that makes me happy.
Very good. Well, anything that makes you happy is when you're on the water, right? So, Johnny, first of all, are you still competing in the kiteboards?
No, I haven't been in a kite race since last summer when we had our summer series and a pro tour stop in San Francisco. So, really not since last summer.
Do you have any plans in the near future?
Well, I hope that we at least get to have a local series here this year. We'll see how that goes, but it's a really fun scene being able to at least do our every other week local kind of beer can races that is kind of what actually spawned the the bigger global kite race series that we have now. I don't have any plans to really get back into the international racing scene, but if there are events nearby, I'll definitely go.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Paul, you and I have talked about this a few times over the years, but going back to the Whitbread Around the World race in 1998, you made the comment that your biggest achievement in your own head, at least, was being comfortable in the Southern Ocean. It's a very tough waters and going fast all the time, knowing when to throttle back. And so how did you become comfortable with sailing down there in so much wind and big waves when it's so cold out?
Well, it's just like any other part of the sport, practice makes perfect or close to it. So I think it was just, we took our licks on leg 2 from Cape Town to Fremantle, and we weren't complacent about it though. We went to school, we took notes, pulled those notes out in Auckland before leg 5, and just operated with a different methodology and essentially throttling back sooner. And it took a while for us America's Cuppers and Olympians to realize that to win the race like that, the goal is to go 97% of full speed 100% of the time. As racing the America's Cup or even the Star, it's pedal to the metal for the hour and a half or 2 hours of the race. And you can't operate like that after 20 days at sea or even 10 days at sea. So it just took a while for me, being the skipper, and a lot of us to get that mindset. But once we did, we had great success. And the quote was, I mean, that was the most satisfying part. Winning was great, but to take a person who grew up sailing dinghies on San Francisco Bay, inside the Golden Gate Bridge, and get comfortable and actually win the Roaring Forties trophy, which is the epitome of round the world racing, that I felt was the real accomplishment.
Well, it was a big victory, big for you, big for the USA. Johnny, before you were in kiteboards, were you racing dinghies or small boats?
Yeah, I grew up probably doing similar racing as Paul, but I got mostly into skiff sailing in 7th, 8th grade. We got a 29er, and so I did that for pretty much all of high school, and then did a short 49er campaign, college sailing, all that. But then, yeah, when I got into kiting and the racing scene was a couple years old in San Francisco, I borrowed some gear and really figured out, like, oh, this is cool. This is kind of putting the going out on a surfboard, on a kite, and the dinghy sailing that I'd grown up doing together. And that was the kind of racing that I really fell in love with, and definitely the thing that I was the most competitive in till then also. So I think the dinghy background helped a lot in that, in getting into the racing scene and quickly kind of clawing my way up to the top of it.
Very cool. So Ed, you're one of the rare athletes in any sport that seems to be comfortable going back and forth between being a competitor at a high level, but then being a coach and going back and forth. So my question is, what did you learn as a coach that helped you with your racing?
Yeah, it's actually a really good question, Gary, because you can look back at my sailing career and you can absolutely track it that when I got reasonably good at coaching, I started doing better as a sailor myself. And it was funny that people asked me to come and help, and I would just, sort of give them my ideas, and we'd talk about things, and it made you think through the situations just that little bit more. And I never won major championships until after I had been coaching for a while, and I think it made things more clear in my mind. It's really cool to have the opportunity to do both, and especially when you can work with top end people. I mean, you saw a number of the people who got awards here at the beginning of the show. Anna Tunnicliffe is one of them. That there's a number of those people who I actually worked with as a coach, and it wasn't because I knew more than them. It was just because I was somebody they could banter back and forth with about what's happening on the race course. And I actually learned a tremendous amount from all the people that I coached because of they're thinking about things in a different way than I do. So it was really helpful.
Cool. Stan, when did you become interested in pursuing a career as a navigator?
Really early on. It was, as a teenager. I just had a fascination with navigation. And I was also interested in technology, but back then navigation wasn't high tech. It was all, dead reckoning and celestial. But nevertheless, I was interested in it. I taught myself to navigate and was keen to do it. And then growing up at LA Yacht Club, before long, I was navigating boats in the Whitney race and to Mexico races, to Mazatlan and to the Hawaii race, navigating L50s for Willard Bell and Al Martin. But yeah, I had that interest in a very young age. And then one thing led to another. And in both of my careers, I've been able to spend my entire life basically working in navigation and tracking, whether it was for sports graphics or whether it was sailboats.
Well, you've certainly had a big impact on the television screen, and in my mind, a bigger impact on out on the race course. Johnny, how fast do you go on those kiteboards?
Not as fast as those new cup boats. I think on the kite race gear we're in the 20 knot range upwind. This is on the foils I'm talking about now. The stuff you're seeing here, nobody's tortured themselves on those boards for 6 or 7 years now. But on the foils, 20 knots upwind probably, and and on a really good day, close to 40 downwind. So yeah, pretty quick.
How much faster have the foils made the boards?
Upwind, I would say board speeds are a little faster foiling, but VMG is definitely better. The angles are just a lot better, and we're on much better kites now too. They're kind of a double skinned ram air kite, so you don't pump it up with a pneumatic pump anymore. It self-inflates and has two skins, and it's just a much more efficient shape. But then downwind, the foils are much, much faster. I think if we hit 30 knots on the other gear, that was really good. And now, yeah, you're over that almost the whole time. So the foils are a significant improvement. And you can survive.
They're pretty impressive to watch, to say the least. So, Paul, you're a longtime America's Cup competitor, an Olympian, round-the-world racer. I think your first love might be the Star. You'll have to tell me if that's true. I have that gut feeling. But how do you deal with the pressure in big-time racing?
You know, I don't know that you ever really overcome the pressure. I think that's part of what drives winners. People who don't feel the pressure probably don't have enough skin in the game. I remember always in the America's Cup, people would say, do you feel the pressure of the sponsors or of the fans? And I never felt any greater pressure than the pressure I was putting on myself. And the dislike for losing. So, and that never goes away, you know, but maybe it shouldn't. So the key, of course, is managing it and keeping your head cool and in the heat of a battle, not over stressing. And I think I could have done better, honestly, in my career. I think other athletes do a better job than I did. I mean, I did an okay job. I did manage to win a few things, but anyway, I don't think stress ever goes away or should go away. It's what's driving.
Yeah. Well, I think one standout of your career, Paul, is you've certainly been versatile in a lot of disciplines on our sport. So take heart in that. So Ed,
yeah, well,
I watched the America's Cup over the last few months, like I'm sure everybody on this call has been doing, and we just seem to have more electronics and more computers, and we see this on Grand Prix boats. You think there's some way we could return to more seat of the pants sailing like you did in your laser or even your match race regattas?
Well, remember, Gary, that, I mean, that's a choice. You seek out the classes and the places that are what you like to do. So if you want to sail a laser, it's still there. There's still really good fleets. You know, remote control boats are suddenly the big rage when the pandemic is on and people don't have the full crew. And it's all seat of the pants. But the America's Cup is definitely the leading, you know, the tip of the spear, leading edge, all those things. In technology, and they're showing once again that there's some amazing leaps out there that are coming forward. I looked inside one of saw some pictures from inside one of the Cup boats the other day, and I was just shocked at how much stuff there is inside, between the hydraulics and the fans and the computers and all the stuff that's just going on. It's really impressive.
You know, I look at the America's Cup where we came in our lifetimes from 12 meters to the ACC boats and the variety of craft since then. What do you think we'll see 50 years from now in the Cup? Where will we be?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the most fun part of our sport is that it continues to change. There's something for everyone. And I'm just so excited that we have guys like Stan Honey around who can figure out the next leap in technology. I mean, think about all the stuff he's done, not just for sailing, but for watching a football game and, you know, being able to tell where the hockey puck was for, you know, things like that, with those lines on the screen. And of course, for sailing, he can show, he's got the programs that show us where the boundaries are and, you know, who's ahead on the crosswind lines and all that stuff. How's that going to affect the new boats as the future comes? You know, things are going to just keep piling forward. We've got AI out there that's doing a an important role in the development of the boats now. How much is that going to be involved in actual sailing of the boats as we go forward? You got single-handed guys going around the world faster than any of the crewed boats did just 15 years ago. So it's exciting to see what's coming. And I honestly don't know what is the next big leap, but I'm excited to see it.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure Stan will brag about the hockey puck, which was one of his first forays into the sports world. But after that, that 1st and 10 line, I was watching a college football game. What the heck is this? And then I heard you and Jed Drake and others were part of it. It was pretty cool. But Stan, let's just go a little further here, is what Ed suggested. What will we see in the future? You're at the leading edge of all this stuff, and what would you forecast?
It's a really interesting question for the sport, and I think we also need to kind of answer the question of what do we want. And we've seen, through our careers in sailing, we've seen all kinds of transition of, should carbon be legal in sails? Should carbon be legal in masts? And, things have gotten high tech, and by and large, they've almost invariably gotten better. But we do need to think about it as the sport of where we want to go. And, there's boats now where you have, powered backwinding winches where you can pull everything in or out from the weather rail just by pushing buttons. And autopilots, are getting as good as humans. And I participated in some of that. But, how far do we want to take it? Do we want to, because the road is, leading to a place where if we're not careful in an offshore race, the people on board the boats are just technicians, and the, alarm rings and they're told to change sails and then go back and go to sleep. And the boat is, trimmed and steered, by AI, and the boat's routed by, the cloud ashore. And is that really where we want to go? Or do we want to continue to have the sport to be a, competition in both, fitness and, brains? So it's tricky. We got to think of where we're going. And then, we look at some other sports, and, a lot of our technical development in sailing, makes things more expensive and harder. And you look at some other sports, and this isn't a great example, but, like skiing, these new skis are way easier than they used to be. So I do think we need to pay attention to where the sport goes.
Want the sport to become a video game, you got to have some athleticism and human drama involved in the whole thing. Let's just talk about the America's Cup for a few minutes and go around the horn here. Paul, what things did you saw that in Auckland that just seemed to give New Zealand the edge?
Well, first I would just say, I want to put my hand up. I was a bit of I had some skepticism about how interesting the product would be. And I have to say it was way more interesting than I anticipated. The upwind start definitely added back an element that we all appreciate, some strategy there and some maneuvering and positioning. That was very cool. And the boats actually were close enough a few of the times to put some actual match racing moves on. Jimmy Spithill's move in race 9 was classic, and kind of showed the difference in experience there in match racing between Burling and Spithill, in terms of Burling not realizing he needed to get out of there right away. But as far as New Zealand goes, everything was just more refined. One of the biggest elements, is the deck being lower than the other teams, so their mast was about half a meter longer, and all that in the commensurate amount of sail area down there sweeping the deck. They had about 4 square meters more sail area in the main than the other teams, and often that allowed them to go with a smaller jib, which was less draggy. Obviously the foils were smaller, and yet they really got to a point where they were less or equally susceptible to falling off the foils as Prada, who had foils that were 50% larger. So everything about the boat was just extremely well thought out, and it's indicative of the level of their technical team. But having said all that, I have a lot of respect for Prada too. I think well, I have respect for all the teams. Obviously, Prada was the best challenger. Their product was pretty nicely massaged as well. It just, the New Zealand one was slightly better.
Yeah, and a couple crazy races when New Zealand got two races in a row, and I guess we'll talk about it in the sailor bars for quite a long time. Ed, you've been around the Cup scene, both as a coach and a competitor for a while. What did you see that made the difference?
Yeah, I thought it was fascinating to see that New Zealand came up with a faster piece of equipment, but because of the restricted course area and the tight, boundaries and so forth, the Luna Rossa guys were better at using their equipment in more difficult situations. So they could win races by, getting the other boat in trouble and keeping New Zealand behind them and then just blocking their way. But once New Zealand got out front, if they didn't make some catastrophic mistake like falling off the foils, just sailing away, they would steadily gain. So they had the fastest piece of equipment. If the course had been wide open, we may have seen New Zealand win more races than they did. But that was part of the game. Everybody knew it going in. And you could see that the Luna Rossa guys really learned their equipment a little bit better for at the moment and peaked at a good time for understanding it. If it had been faster, they could have won.
It was interesting that the covering, because you got really narrow wind shadows there, so you had to really be precise to line up your boat with the other boat to try and hurt them. It was fascinating to watch. Johnny, did you watch any of the America's Cup?
Yep.
What'd you think?
Yeah,
Did
I
you
watched.
see anything special there?
I mean, I don't have anything as insightful to say as two America's Cup skippers that just spoke, but I think just the speeds are incredible. I mean, the fact that what was it, 8 years ago, we were on kites here, kind of almost keeping up with the boats in the bay, liking to think that we were like in the same ballpark, and now they're doing 30 knots VMG upwind and 12 knots of breeze or something silly like that. It was pretty mind blowing. I was a skeptic of the whole monohull concept without knowing that much about it, and now seeing the final result was pretty cool. It was very impressive. Wish we got to see more high wind
They were sailing along
races.
about over 3 times the speed of the wind. That's a concept. Sailing the speed of the wind seems like a good concept. And in San Francisco back in 2013, it was close to 3 times the speed of the wind. Now they were close to 4 times the speed of the wind. Stan, you were close to the Cup scene, working with the racing rules of sailing and helping out with the Cup. What did you see now that it's over? You probably couldn't say anything 2 days ago, but the Cup's over, so you're allowed to talk now. What did you see?
Yeah, I was actually not on the racing rule side with Slater, but I was on the class rule side, the technical interpretations. I thought that the Team New Zealand is kind of similar to what they did in Bermuda, but they made a few decisions on, technically, and then they followed those up perfectly, as far as they went in all directions in terms of the design of the whole boat and sails. And so I think, New Zealand, they had the smaller foils, which is great, and very high-tech foils. But then there's a bunch of follow-on decisions they made perfectly. So they ended up with this integrated package. They had, a rudder where they could adjust the height, and that gave them more pitch control of the boat. They did a really nice job of using the pitch of the boat to, control their foil angles. They had a very interesting takeoff sequence that helped them take off with smaller foils. They had that low deck, which gave them more sail area, down low. I mean, but the whole thing was just, brutally well engineered. Not necessarily a beautiful boat, but, a brutally well engineered boat, which I think is now becoming characteristic of Kiwi programs. And then the Luna Rossa boat was gorgeous. I mean, just beautiful to look at. Their underdeck boom, or the boom that was underneath that sort of deck fairing, I thought was a really good idea. The sails were, spectacular. An incredibly nice end plate on the mainsail. And then I agree, the boat was just superbly well sailed. So I thought it was far more interesting than I had expected it to be. And I think it was really interesting to see that, how well Luna Rossa was able to do with a boat that ended up being a little bit slower, but they sailed it magnificently.
I thought it was interesting. I think it was after the first day when Peter Burling said, we're a little rusty. And when you think about it, they hadn't had a real race since the Christmas regatta in December, but they just seemed to get a little bit better every day, figuring out how to get off the starting line. And to my eye, I thought they had a little bit more speed, and that certainly showed, winning the last 5 races in a row. So they got the job done. Paul, what sailing is in your future? What do you got coming up? The Star Sailors League. What else?
I got a little just Star Racing. We got a Western Hemisphere Championship next month in Miami. I'm gonna attend. Gonna sail, I think, in the Rolex Capri race week on an Italian maxi, and that's about it. I'm getting my 55-year-old wooden starboat is getting a full tune-up. Got a new deck on her. The boat I bought, Durwood Knowles' boat, actually won the gold medal the last time the Olympics were in Japan. It's called Gem. So I'm going to sail that in September on Gull Lake in Michigan. And we'll see. As you said before, the star is really the common thread in my whole career, and they'll probably bury me in one.
I did an interview with Durwood Knowles at the Busan Olympic Games, and he was sailing the Star, and he was in his late 60s, and he said he could do okay upwind, but he got beat a little bit downwind on the reach legs. But it was really, and that was a windy regatta in Busan. It was very cool to see him out there. Ed, what's on your roster? What's coming up for you in sailing?
Well, actually, tomorrow I'm racing J70s in Tampa, so that's the immediate future. But it looks like things are going to start opening up here in, say, May for the circuits that I do. The RC44s over in Europe, and then the TP52 stuff, both in Europe and in the Great Lakes, are going to start happening in the summertime. And as Paul said, there's a chance that we might pull one of the maxis out here and get involved in the Rolex Capri event, and maybe a couple of the others during the summer, hopefully to the World Championships later for the maxi class.
I go back, Ed. I can't leave this without asking you. Race 7, 2007 America's Cup. You're behind after a gigantic wind shift, 120 degrees on that last leg, but the New Zealand's got to do a penalty before they cross the line. What was going on in your head, knowing they got to do a penalty, but you're behind, and this could be the end of the Cup if you win the race? What were you thinking at that time?
Well, you have to go back to the last weather mark. I mean, we were in a really strong position, having just gotten a penalty, and we rounded about 5 or 6 boat lengths ahead in 14, 15 knots of wind, which on a mature sea breeze afternoon, we should be able to sail all the way to the finish like that. But about 2/3 of the way down the course, it started getting light, and we were just defending starboard tack. So we were, more inshore so that we would stay on starboard. And we saw the New Zealanders start to get headed to windward of us. And then they started to really get headed, and they started pulling a jib on the deck. So we started doing the same. We could see up ahead that, there was something changing. But before we could get the jib hoisted, the breeze went so far forward that it became a tight reach. And we didn't have time or the forethought to actually put the little jockey pole extender that you need when you go tight reaching in those boats. We didn't get that installed on the windward after guy, and it put too much pressure on our spinnaker pole, and the spinnaker pole broke and came right off the mast, and it came shooting back right into the chest of our trimmer, and it stopped there because it reached the headstay. So he's holding this spinnaker pole right here, and he's trimming with his one hand, and we're trying. Now we have a kite that's really round and doesn't have the right spread on the bottom. So it got to be a little bit of a scramble. The boys did a great job, got the jib up, and you saw how the finish went. The amazing thing was at the finish, we didn't know who had won between us. We knew it was really close. And that's when I learned that Ernesto Burrelli has a mind that's much quicker than the rest of us, because he looked at there was a woman on the bow of the boat, and she had our color flag in her hand, was ready to put it up. And then the gun went, and she looked at it, and then she looked at the other color, and I was like, no, and then she almost switched flags and then didn't, and then started raising ours. And before she even got it up to our waist, Ernesto had his hands up in the air, celebrating the win, and we all absorbed it a couple of seconds later, but very exciting moment.
Wow, it's one of the great moments in the sport of sailing, and I don't know how you just focused on steering with all that going on, and it was pretty exciting stuff. Johnny, what can you tell us that you learned from your dad, who, of course, done a lot of sailing in San Francisco Bay, and maybe even your sister too?
Well, his famous quote is probably one that many people have had, but he coached Cal for a long time as a volunteer coach, their sailing team, and they made him some shirts, and it's get a good start, go the right way, don't F up, Coach Paul. So that was his main advice, and I think it usually served us well when we were sailing 29ers together. But besides that, I mean, I think the most valuable stuff I learned from him was just the subtleties of the bay and the city front. I've done a lot of racing there, and some of, like my first top 3 finish in a Worlds was there in the 29er, and really it was the hours that I got to spend on the water sailing with him, learning the currents and the little shifts up the city front. So that was, I don't know, a pretty cool thing that I got to learn through listening to him, but also sailing with him. Pretty special.
So were you steering the 29er and your dad was crewing for you? Or the other way around?
Not during that event, but for a couple of years we sailed together. We started off switching positions every leg because I could only do part of it. Yeah, I think they had that in the intro clip. So we sailed together for a while, and then I got a more nimble crew, Matt Noble, and we sailed together for a few years, and we got third at the Worlds there at St. Francis in 2005. So that was kind of our first real finish at an international regatta. And then we never sailed 49ers together. I don't think that would have worked out very well.
Well, he might have been just slightly over the age barrier there in a 49er, but very cool that you got to do that with your dad. Stan, you and Sally raced in the 505 class for quite a long time. And all the pictures I've ever seen, she's always steering and you were out on the wire. How was that? Tell us a little bit about that, your experience in the 5.0 with Sally.
Oh, it was fabulous. That's how we met. I think that's the first 25 years of our sailing together. We did very well, on all the U.S. races. I think we went to 5 or 6 different world championships. And by far, she's the best helms person, and I'm much better size and weight for the trapeze. So that's how it always went. Unless we won a regatta. If we won a regatta with a race to go, then we would switch. And then it was frustrating because we would each naturally do our old job. So that learned quite a bit from that.
And have you done some double sailing on your Cal 40 with her lately?
Yeah, Sally and we bought a Cal 40 in '88 to go cruising when we were thinking we were aging out of the 5.0, but old habits died hard. So we set it up as a racing boat, and Sally made all new sails. She still had her sail loft, and then we did nothing but race the boat. So we probably have done, 20 Farallons races, all of the, Northern California races. We raced it to Hawaii 5 times. I did it once single-handed. Sally and I did it, I think, 3 times double-handed. We did it with a crew of 4. We did very well at that. We won the Farallons race overall. Double-handed. We won the Pacific Cup double-handed, beating all the fully crewed boats. So we had a great run in the Cal 40. Then a couple of years ago, we sailed it around through the Panama Canal to Newport, Rhode Island, to do the Newport Bermuda race. We got the boat in perfect shape with all new sails, 3DI main, perfect bottom. We had Carl Buchan and Don Jesberg and Jonathan Livingston were going to crew for us in the Bermuda race, and then they canceled the race because of the virus. So we bolted the cruising gear back on and have been cruising in Maine, so we've finally gotten around to cruising, which is what we bought the boat for in '88.
That took you a long time to get cruising. Stan, just quickly tell us a little bit of the legacy of your boat. Who owned it before?
We didn't know it at the time, but I wanted a Cal 40 because I delivered him and I raced him a bunch as a kid, and it's just a beautifully, well-mannered boat for shorthanded racing. And then there was a Cal 40 that was a wreck that was in Ron Moore's yard in Santa Cruz, and it had bullet holes in it and homeless people living in it, but we were able to get it cheap. And it hadn't been screwed up, so we got it all fixed up. And then we later discovered that its name had never been changed, and it was the Cal 40 Illusion that had originally been owned by Bus Maasbacher and Vince Montesano. And so there's half-hulls of it in the New York Yacht Club and in the Larchmont Yacht Club, and it turned out to be a famous Cal 40.
Very cool. Well, Vincent Montesano was one of the great play hard types out in the water, and of course Bus Mossbacher, two-time America's Cup winner. So a lot of heritage on your boat there, even though it fell in disarray sometime after they had it. Paul, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about our friend who left the world way too early, Tom Blackaller, and maybe just share a few words of some of the things you learned from Tom.
Well, as I said in the video, Tom asked me to crew for him in the Star when I was 18 years old. And that was shortly after I think you met. One of your lines is that when I was sailing lasers, Tom pointed me out to you. So I was just blessed to have, I think Ed said it too, we just, in life, sometimes you come along at the right time, and timing is everything. And Tom was 20 years older than me, and although he didn't always act like it. But he took me under his wing, and I was a pretty good talent by then. I'd won some little North American championships in the prams that we sailed at the time, but he took my whole racing. He taught me how to race. He taught me tactics and strategy, and he was a fierce competitor. He actually wasn't great at testing or tuning, or he didn't have patience. He was just he probably should have been a race car driver from the get-go, but I think his father took him sailing at Inverness Yacht Club when he was 8 years old, and somehow he got in an El Toro, and he got in that track. But he probably was more about competing than about any given sport or tool. And I think he truly loved the car racing. He liked the speed, and even in sailing, as you know, he got into the catamaran racing. I forget what those 40s were called on San Francisco Bay, and he even predicted that the America's Cup would be in catamarans. So, anyway, he taught me how to race, did 2 America's Cups with him, one with you and him, and a great guy. He died at 49. I remember when I turned 49 thinking to myself, Jesus, I've now reached Tom's age. It's way too early, and that was 12 years ago. So I was just a fortunate person. He really changed my whole career. He gave me a job at North Sails after the '84 Olympics. I went and raced the Sardinia Cup for a client. We were top boat at Sardinia Cup. A bunch of Italian owners noticed that, one of whom was Raul Gardini. It's just interesting how things happen, and what the trickle-down effect of one seemingly small event.
Yeah, I think if Tom were still with us, he'd be just about 81 now. And, like I said, he left us too early, but he had a good impact on me, and I know he had a really good impact on you as well. Well, everybody, thank you very much for a good session. You're all my heroes. I'm sorry that we weren't able to give out a Rolex Yachtsman of the Year or Yachtswoman of the Year this year for the 2020 season, but hopefully we get a lot more sailing going on, and a year from now we can honor some woman and some man that excels on the race course. So with that, time to sign off. Say thank you very much, and I hope to see everybody out in the water, and thank you all.